program this afternoon, and we hope that it will be an interactive session. Welcome to our panelists, our wonderful, beautiful panelists in this Women's Month, and welcome to everyone who's joining us on the webinar this afternoon. So, in honor of Women's Month and in honor of the country's drive to deal with the issues of climate change, we've arranged the webinar today to discuss some of these issues and also to provide a platform for women to possibly propose their own solutions to some of these challenges. Climate change has had a devastating impact on the African continent, and recently in South Africa, we've been witness to the dreadful flooding and the loss of life and homes, properties, personal possessions during the heavy rains which caused flooding in KwaZulu-Natal and parts of the Eastern Cape and the Northwest. We know that these devastating floods can be attributed to the impact of climate change. The Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, Minister Barbara Creecy, during this year in July at a high-level panel political discussion at the 13th Petersburg Climate Dialogue in Berlin, Germany, highlighted the importance of adequate finance from developed to developing nations to support their just energy transitions towards climate-resilient societies and net zero emission futures. In July 2022, the Presidential Climate Change Commission handed over the Just in Transition framework to President Cyril Ramaphosa. This framework will guide South Africa's transition to a low-carbon, inclusive, climate-resilient economy and society. South Africa is doing so in order to meet the international obligations as part of the global climate change efforts. So we will be talking to three wonderful women today, our panelists. And before we get to their introduction, we'd just like to remind attendees to contribute either on the chat or onto the Q&A function, and we will respond to those questions either online or in person. We will allow time for discussions directly after the various items, but we welcome you to interact with our panelists today. So let's start with our first panelist, Her Royal Highness Princess Beatrice Sakanin Kamboule. She's a serial entrepreneur, a prominent and experienced community builder, motivational speaker, and a best-selling author. She serves in leadership roles in numerous community, government, and business organizations throughout the country. She's a former educator with over 30 years business experience in diverse industries such as property development, industrial cleaning, health risk medical waste, energy, and agriculture. Her businesses operate in several provinces across the country. As the founder of the Princess Tsakani Foundation, she has assisted over 1,000 orphaned and abandoned learners with full uniforms through her annual golf days. Furthermore, she contributes to the entrepreneurial development by hosting the annual Limpopo Business Symposium. She is here today representing the Presidential Climate Change Commission. Princess, could we hand over to you, please?
Thank you, Joanne, for that very kind introduction. And happy Women's Month to all the women who have joined us today. I think just to add to what Joanne said about the Just Energy Transition Framework, she's already pointed out that we handed over the document on the 5th of July to the President of the country. The framework, what is it all about? It's about increasing the ability of communities to adapt the adverse impacts of climate. The framework is about fostering a climate resilient economy and reaching the net zero target greenhouse emission by 2050. This is our target as a country. It's also about ensuring that As a country, we create decent work for all. It's about inclusive growth. It's about eradication of poverty. The framework's goal is to ensure that people are at the center of decision making, especially with those who bear the brunt of adverse climate changes. And as you're all aware, women are disproportionately affected by all ills in our society, including adverse climate conditions. Joanne did mention the floods that caused enormous damage to informal settlement around KZN. Lives were affected, livelihoods were affected, the ecosystem was damaged, as well as the infrastructure. So I think the discussion today is about, as women, how do we ensure that we are at the center of the decisions that will be implemented during the energy transition. As women, we have to be part of the design and the implementation of climate change response action. As women, we need to lead and contribute in finding solutions towards a sustainable future. As women, we need to reflect on how we will be impacted, how we are already, and we will be impacted by this adverse climate condition. How do we adapt our businesses and our environment to respond to the effects of climate change? Women in South Africa are vulnerable. Women in rural areas are at a very at worse condition. Women, children, the unemployed, they form part of that society that we need to ensure that during the transition, they are not left behind. During our consultations and extensive engagements with community, as commissioners, what we did, we move around the country where we spoke to members of society, we spoke to traditional leaders, we spoke to civil organizations, we spoke to employed people, we spoke to the unemployed about the just transition. During those engagements, many of those people expressed their frustrations, expressed their anger, and those consultations, together with research that was done by the Commission, as well as observing international best practice. Those are the three basic components that contributed to the just transition, just energy transition framework. The question that we need to respond to is it, as women, mitigation in 2030, what does it look like? Mitigation definitely means that we have to reduce demand from coal, and we have to move in with what will be happening as we move towards the 2030. In other words, renewables are going to peak as a source of energy in the country. So what's happening now, I think we're all aware that there's already an energy mix. The country is slowly moving away from coal, and renewables are progressing at a very, very fast level. As women, where are we? How do we participate in this environment? First, how do we transform our businesses as we are operating today and move towards the green economy? How do we ensure that in our environments there is upskilling and reskilling that will allow us to participate in the new economy? As women, are we innovative enough? Are we agile enough to ensure that all the opportunities that will come with the green economy, we are part of? So those are the questions that we need to reflect and ask ourselves. How do we reposition ourselves to minimize the impact of climate change? Those with small businesses, how do we ensure that your small business pivot and look at what's happening in the green economy? So that's a whole lot of questions. So it needs us to sit back and reflect in my own environment. What is happening? Because I think we're all aware that climate change is not just an environmental issue, it's an economic and social issue. We, as a country, we don't have an option, to decide not to be part of this process. And globally, we all understand the effects of not transitioning. As South Africa, we know that if we do not meet the target that we've set ourselves as a country, we will be affected with what we call carbon tax. The vehicles, as we know them, we know that we have to move on to electric vehicles. At the moment, it's very unclear as to how the country will transition to electric vehicles. I think the country, as a country, we're still grappling with a lot of things. Is there going to be an incentive for those vehicles, and all sorts of issues? The hydrogen economy, as we were all aware, that is the future. So as women, are we empowered enough, first in terms of knowledge? Because climate change is not just about, it does not just affect those who are around the fossil fuel value chain. Yes, when we went to Mpumalanga, for example, it was very, very evident that if you look at the community around, say, Wheatbank, there is an adverse health impact on their lives. In Wheatbank, I think most of us, when you go, they don't even want to drink the water from the tap. So definitely we can already see the devastating impact of climate change in those communities. But let's always remember that even if we are not around those communities, there are other climate conditions that will affect us wherever you are. So I think this is one thing that as women, we need to reflect and say, in my own space, what is happening around me? The floods, I think, was a great reminder, just to say that it might not just, next time it won't just be confined there. We are all susceptible to this adverse climate changes. So today I would like us to look into what is our role as women? We have to be part of the solution. As women, we do have, we can propose solutions because we know our needs best in our society. We need to communicate those needs. we need to ensure that as decisions are made around climate change, we are part of those decisions so that we are not left out. Nothing should happen to us without us. So I would like to maybe pause there and invite comments, input, and questions. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you so much, Princess Kamboule. Colleagues and attendees from outside of government, you're welcome to ask questions. I'm looking for hands at the moment, or any comments on the chat.
None so far, Joanne.
Wow. Princess, I think you must have covered a mouthful. I think people are still processing.
Julia's hand is up.
Thank you very much, Julia. You're welcome.
Hi there, my name is Julia Evans. I'm a climate journalist from Daily Maverick. Thank you, Princess. That was a great introduction. I just wanted to, and I completely agree with everything you said, women are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis, but I don't think people really understand how exactly that is. I know from speaking to some scientists, people have illustrated, like in some other countries in Africa, women don't have the right to land. Like that's one concrete example. Or women are often forced to bear the brunt of looking after their families, and then they're working in, you know, extreme heats if they're working in farms and that sort of thing. But I would really like to chat about some concrete examples that I could share with the public about how women are actually disproportionately affected, because it's sad, but when you say that, when we speak about issues surrounding women, often people roll their eyes and they're like, we're in the 21st century, it's equal. But, you know, we need concrete examples to illustrate to people that it's not equal.
Thank you so much, Julia, for that question, because you're so right. You know, it's like when we talk about inequality, poverty, and employment, it's like it's become such a cliche that at times when we don't, we don't make reference to concrete examples, it's a conversation that does not advance, you know, beyond an engagement like this. Let me start with the land. When we talk about the right to land, in the current situation in South Africa, you know, we're talking about solar energy, we talk about wind energy, right? Many Blacks, obviously in particular women, do not have access to that land. So that land is in the hands of a certain part of our community. As you are aware that if you want, let's start with wind. If we're talking about wind, renewable energy, it's only certain areas in our country where you can have a project. So those with land are earning serious money from leasing that land. And I think we had an engagement a few days ago. Somebody was saying that in the next 4 or 5 years, just on leasing of the land that is suitable to wind and solar for our intermittent energy, that is a 5.4 billion industry. So as women, as most South Africans, not just women, but obviously women as well, we don't have access to that. And our discussion that we're having, I think last week with some women, was that there is still, in terms of solar, there is still an opportunity that we might need to look into and investigate, because that type of, if you're looking at solar, for example, it's not like wind. Yes, you need to do studies to ensure that you have enough sun, but that is the land that is mostly in the hands of traditional leaders. So what we can do as women is to have to inform ourselves, and obviously either we lease land or we go into joint venture with traditional leadership, because with the recent announcements by the presidency and everyone else, it means that you can have a solar project and you can be able to, obviously, for own use, but as well as you can sell. There is a system so that you can even sell your energy from a rural village in Malamulele to somebody in Cape Town. So that's just one area that as women we need to look into. Maybe another example we could be talking about, because as we are all aware that climate change also affects food security. When there are droughts, who gets affected? It's women, because most women are into subsistence farming. Because even the big farmers will be affected. But with a woman who does not have a sustainable job, who has that small piece of land just to feed the family, it means that their livelihood will be threatened. We think about water already. As a country, we are highly constrained in terms of our water resources. So when we do not have enough water in the country, who gets affected most? It's the women, because those are the basics that we use first to feed our own families, as well as to do, if we are able to do business, we depend on all that. We don't have many other resources, so we still want to have power. We still want to have access to water. We need access to land. So that is why we're saying that women are disproportionately affected and will be in future by the adverse climate change. I hope I've responded to your question, Julia.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Princess. I see that there is a question raised on the Q&A. Someone is asking about the elements of the Just Transition Framework. I don't know if you'd like to answer that live or if you'd like to respond in the Q&A, Princess.
Thanks, Joanne. I think I can quickly, because I think that was part of my introduction, but I'm happy to repeat it. In terms of the Just Energy Transition Framework, how do we define it? It's about us as a country increasing our ability to adapt to the adverse impact of climate change. It's about us as a country fostering a climate resilient economy and also reaching net zero greenhouse emissions by 2050. The framework is about creating decent work for all. It's about inclusive growth. It's about eradication of poverty. So when we bring it closer to what we're discussing today, what we are saying is that women must be at the center of decision making. So because we bear the brunt of the adverse climate change. So in short, that is what the framework is all about. And how did the framework came about? Mainly, obviously, there's been extensive research that was being done around the issues of climate. And it did not just start now with us as a commission. It started back in 1999, I think, with Labour and the later government. So there is a vast amount of research that has been done about climate change. We also followed international best practice. So during our consultations as a commission, we brought in various institutions so that we can, as a country, we can come up with what we call a pathway. How do you get from A to B? What do you hope to achieve in 2023? What do you hope to achieve in 2030? So that has to be informed by science, so that you do not just guess. So that's one part of it. But the last part, which is very important, was the extensive consultations and engagement with various communities. So where we engaged everyone from your traditional leaders, your civil society, your labor, unemployed people, so that you can get to hear what are their needs, what are their experiences, what are their frustrations. So all those were brought together to form what we now call the Just Energy Transition Framework. So the next step from here, now you've got a framework, but it can't just be about the framework. The next step is about implementation. That implementation should be detailed. If we, for example, talk about creating employment, there has to be a detailed strategy on what is it that will happen. If, for another example, if we say, because we know that when you talk just energy, when you talk about transition, it will involve technology, big technology, and the 8.5 billion that we talking about, we have to say, out of that money, how does we ensure that people, especially women, are not left behind? Communities are part of the process. How do local businesses benefit from a technology that gets developed or rolled out in their area? So it's all about that. What we are saying, we're saying that we cannot have a transition, cannot be just if the vulnerable, the impoverished, women, youth are not part of it. So I think, in short, this is what the Just Energy Transition Framework is all about. I hope I've responded, Joanne.
I think that's a wonderful short response, Princess. We do need to watch our time, and we'd like to thank you very much for being so succinct in your response. I'm sure if anybody would like further information on that, they will find information available online.
Thank you so much, Joanne, and to everyone who has. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. And that moves us on to our next speaker. Her name is Tandile Chinavanu, and she is an environmental and social activist. She works as a climate change and energy campaigner for Greenpeace Africa. She writes about public health, energy access, climate mitigation, and the intersectionality of climate change, particularly its impact on women of color. So if I can hand over to you, Tandile, to take us into the next area of discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Joanne, and thank you so much for facilitating a space for us to have these very important discussions. As you've mentioned, I'm a climate and social justice activist, and a part of my work is mainstreaming gender into conversations surrounding climate, as well as advocating for gender-centric progressive climate policy. And we're at such a pivotal time right now in history in that climate change poses a significant threat to the life as we know it. Much like COVID-19, it threatens to expose the inefficiencies of our systems, the inequalities that exist in our systems, and also threatens to amplify these issues while upending our lives in the process. So a crucial element of these discussions is adaptation and ensuring that women are resilient in the face of all these challenges that we'll be facing, and for many of us already facing. So the importance of adaptation is building that resilience, as I mentioned, in communities, individuals, as well as the systems that we operate in, the governments that we live under. And an important part of this is having an effective, for this to be effective, is to recognize the concept of intersectionality. And I recognize that there are people that are not necessarily receptive to this concept, but just to give an overview of why it's so important, is that we need to recognize that while some people may say, we struggle to understand how others can be affected differently by climate change, because, we may experience heat waves and floods, we don't experience them in the same way. We have other people experience them disproportionately from other people. A stimulus may be the same, but due to our social context, we may respond to it very differently. Due to our socialization, we may respond to those stimuli differently. And that's why intersectionality is so important. So intersectionality, a term that has been coined by a professor in civic engagement, Kimberly Crenshaw, basically speaks to acknowledging that everyone and their own unique experiences determine the oppression and the way in which they experience discrimination. Anything and everything can marginalize a specific group of people, including their race, including but not limited to race, gender, class, sexual orientation, and their physical ability. So within a South African context, of course, we understand that we have the context of colonialism, apartheid, as well as existing cultural norms that are contributing factors to marginalizing people. So just to speak to a bit more about within South Africa's context, who may potentially be marginalized, that would, as I mentioned, be women. And for the context or for the purpose of this conversation, we'll be looking at women and people that identify as a part of the LGBTQIA community, and how these historical contexts that we have exacerbate some of the experiences that they have. So I like to approach this discussion about climate change and the impacts that it has on particular communities by segmenting two different contexts. So I'll discuss in a rural context, as well as how we may potentially see climate change manifesting itself in our lives in an urban context as well. So within a rural context, we have people that are they interact more frequently with the natural environment because they may be dependent on the natural environment through subsistence farming. So they also have more of an astute ability to detect changes in the environment because they interact so frequently with the natural environment. Another issue would be that they would see it manifested immediately in front of them because their yields would be reducing over the years. They may not necessarily be seeing or receiving the same amount of rain. They may be taking note of how much rain they see every season and how that affects their yields, as well as heat waves because of the landscape of the environment and how it impacts their experience of it. They'll be more likely to experience certain manifestations of the weather and the changes in the climate ultimately. Another factor that is of importance here, as mentioned already, I believe it was brought up by Julia, was the issue of land tenure and the fact that in a lot of rural communities in South Africa, there is still the system of communal land ownership and how that may impact the resilience of the communities, or rather how certain norms, traditions, and standards within these communities may affect their interaction with land and land tenure. And it reminds me of a speaking engagement in which our former public protector, Thuli Madonsela, spoke at a few years ago. And she cited that land expropriation is happening every day in South Africa. And it seems like quite a shocking statement at first, but when you consider in these rural contexts, the type of conflicts that are going on, people are specifically traditional leaders are making decisions for the community members. And a lot of the time, women don't get to be in positions of decision-making, as I mentioned, because of the traditions in those and customs in those cultures. And so most of the time, when a traditional leader decides to, for example, lease out or sell land that is under communal ownership to a international conglomerate within mining spaces, those people are put out by that. They are immediately impacted by the operations of those mines, or they are forcibly displaced by those mining operations in very unfortunate circumstances. And often, a lot of the time, these interactions are facilitated by our government. Hence the idea that, you know, land expropriation is happening every day. People are still being forcibly removed from their land. And of course, the connection to land and climate is very pivotal, because access to land provides a sense of resilience. It is a form of currency. And when you are able to have land in your possession, there's a bunch of opportunities that are opened up to you. Should you be affected by extreme weather event that decimates your home, your crops, you have the ability to produce your title deed and go claim from insurance or something along those lines. And that provides you with a bit of resilience that in a country where landlessness is widespread, people may not be able to have those opportunities to rebuild because of those inequalities that exist. Within the rural context, as I mentioned, there is the issue of the immediate impact that climate change has. As I mentioned before, issues of drought, when climate changes, the climate shocks that are associated with it being drought, floods, as we've seen recently, the extreme weather events that have been taking place across our country, and those breed a situation where there is a scarcity of resources. And as is the case in our country, we usually, when we hear of spikes in gender-based violence, it's often linked to issues of scarcity that particularly in this instance, men are exerting violence on women because they are feeling insecure about food insecurity and the scarcity of financial resources. And so those breed the issues of gender-based violence, as we've been told time and time again. So just to, maybe in the interest of time, speak to the manifestations of climate change, specifically in women's lives in an urban context, because we are more removed from the natural environment. We are interacting with buildings all day. We have a very different experience of climate change and how it manifests. So we don't necessarily have the same interactions with the natural environment, as I've mentioned. And for many of us, we've lost the indigenous knowledge and practices that we traditionally or historically had, and those that would help us facilitate with interactions with the environment. Of course, the issues of landlessness also are present in an urban context, but we mostly see this manifesting in access to and destruction of critical infrastructure. And so I'd like to focus on two main infrastructure that women depend upon for equity as well as development, and that being issues of sexual reproductive healthcare and access to that, as well as access to education. So maybe I'll just zone in a bit on access to education and the current context in South Africa and how we're seeing this manifest in women's lives. So of course, we understand that there are many obstacles to girls accessing education, including period poverty, pregnancy, as well as how these disasters have now interrupted schooling for all learners, but specifically for women and young girls, adolescent girls. So it was released this year, the NITSCRAM released that 750,000 people dropped out of school post-pandemic, and that is 3 times the usual rate of people dropping out of school. And a number of factors have been contributing towards this. Initially, it was once you've lost multiple days of learning as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, they lost multiple days of learning. They struggled to catch up. They didn't have, say, necessarily the support and resources that they needed, specifically those school feeding programs that could keep them in schools. And as a result, people feeling a desperation to provide for themselves and their families have probably turned away from, the traditional learning system and being able to follow education. And if they've been driven into finding work immediately. And unfortunately, one of those areas has been sex work. We've seen this happening in countries across SADC. Recently, there were examples in Zimbabwe that a number of people have been driven into sex work, and they're finding themselves also being groomed by older men. They're forced into early marriages, as is the case when scarcity is an issue globally. The instances of early marriage have been pushed upon young girls that are in very, very difficult economic contexts. And that's something that persists in South Africa and has been a fixture in South African culture, as you're familiar with the term uktwala. So instances of these may become more prominent as families struggle to take care of everyone in the family, and they may, resort to instances of uktwala. And something that is also of importance here, as I mentioned, as I link into the next issue, is the issue of sexual reproductive health. If people are being forced into sex work, they're being forced into early marriages, it opens up a risk for them to, end up in teenage pregnancies, to have HIV, the HIV incidence increases. And as we know, the largest population that is experiencing the highest HIV incidence right now is adolescent girls between the age of 15 up until probably about 24. Those are the people that are being most affected by this. So it's economic issues like this that are contributing and driving the spread of HIV and AIDS. But yes, as I mentioned, the disruption to healthcare services specifically is also exacerbating this. And we saw this already taking place in the early days of the pandemic, when clinics, hospitals were now prioritizing COVID-19 patients. A lot of people that were being turned away were those that needed essential healthcare services, such as I mentioned, HIV screening, STI screening, pregnancy or prevention, as well as antenatal and abortion services. So these services were disrupted, and a lot of adolescent girls were not able to get access to these services, and ultimately will find themselves in situations where they are desperate to get this kind of healthcare. But this is not only isolated to adolescent girls and women. This is also something that is experienced similarly by LGBTQIA community members. Something that is very important for us to understand is that in the healthcare system that we have, there are implicit bias and discriminations. And when LGBTQIA people go to certain facilities, they know they will receive help without discrimination. Others they know to avoid because they may not be able to receive the same level of healthcare that they can. So once we are finding ourselves in situations like we may have seen, for example, case study, the floods in KZN, where a number of healthcare facilities were damaged. The number is not necessarily, there isn't a lot of clear reporting on what those numbers have been, but there have been 84 clinics at least that were damaged specifically during those floods. But it's quite challenging to get information about the surrounding areas that experienced flooding, not just in May and June, but as well as last year in December. So there's been quite a bit of significant damage that has been sustained to our healthcare facilities across the country as a result of recent floods. So those are the issues that occurs, that you won't be able to access healthcare facilities because they've been damaged by rains and floods. They're being closed down, and it's quite difficult to find access to healthcare that is also safe and free of discrimination in instances where the accessibility becomes a lot more strained. So those are some of the issues that we're looking at education and healthcare have been disrupted significantly as a result of extreme weather events, and they'll continue to be disrupted unless we can ensure that we have the necessary adaptation measures and are capacitating these communities sufficiently. An unfortunate consequence of these is that people are displaced by losing their homes, and they're forced into shelters. And of course, in the context of this country, violence, and specifically violence against women, is something that is of particular importance. So forcing people, women as well as LGBTQ people, into these shelters is of significant danger to them. They could find themselves in situations where they are being assaulted. And unfortunately, the culture of homophobia in our country means that many of these people may be faced with physical violence, threats of corrective rape. And those are the things that we need to understand, why it's so important to have stability and structure for people to not necessarily be displaced. So yeah, those are some of the things that we're advocating for and trying to mainstream into our discussions, that people understand that these are the obstacles that are facing specifically women and people that are in the LGBTQIA community, and how we can facilitate ensuring resilience within these communities. I'll maybe stop there to open to comments and questions.
Thank you so much, Thandile. And we will open for questions quickly. I see that there are also questions raised in the Q&A session. And maybe our panelists would like to look at these questions and think on them before I give them an opportunity to reply as a group. I see the first is from Andrea Kampfer, and she's asking about platforms where women can talk to the mental and social pressures that they experience, and where they would have an opportunity to encourage each other. And she's asking if there's such a forum available already, and if not, it's something that should be strongly considered by the Presidential Climate Change Commission. So I think if our panelists can think on that, and we'll open that discussion. Then there's another question by Manshu Sawadi asking about the environmental assessments to protect the environment. And are these measures doing service to communities? And are they supportive of women in farming when we look at the regulations and the procedures that are in place for environmental protection? So I don't know if our panelists would like to give an answer now, or whether you'd like a few minutes. I am looking at the time, and our next panelist has warned us that in her environment, she is experiencing some of the variations of our power supply. So I'd just like to check, Thandiwe, are you still able to join us?
Yes, I'm still very much available.
All right, wonderful, thank you. So then I'm just going to ask if there are any questions to Thandile Chinavahu, who's with Greenpeace Africa, if there are any direct questions. If there are hands raised or questions in the chat.
None
And
at this point.
Not at this point. Thank you, Peliswa. At this point, then, I'd like us to move to our next panelist. And once she has finished her item, I think I'd like to hear on the questions that have been raised in the Q&A, and I'll give Thandile an opportunity there to give her response to those questions. So if we can move to our next panelist, Thandiwe Mkuno, born in the agriculturally vibrant village of Mahlongwa near Mkomas in KwaZulu-Natal on the south coast. She says her decision to study chemistry was to help marginalized communities, particularly women, to produce food at cheaper cost. While working full-time, she discovered that the majority of industries produced waste that could be used to make compost, but that much of this ended up in landfill sites. She wishes to use her expertise to make compost that would benefit emerging farmers in her community. And she grows a variety of vegetables to sell at local supermarkets and within the community. Her farm employs 10 people seasonally and has support from the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, the CSIR. She's currently also studying a master's degree in chemical engineering at the University of KwaZulu-Natal and using her farming methods to support her research. So, Thandiwe, you are actually a living, breathing example of women who are out there in the environment. If you'd like to invite us into your world, I'll hand over to you.
Oh, greetings, everybody. Thank you very much to the team, to GCIS. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you very much to the viewers. I greet you all in this afternoon. Thank you for your presence. As Joanne has said, yes, I am. I'm doing my master's degree in chemical engineering, and I'm also very much passionate about farming. Now, one thing that has led to the other is that I started farming at a very, very young age with my mother here in the rural areas of Amahlongwa. And then we have gotten used into farming, and even when I started working, I was able to have the small pot plants wherever I am when I'm renting out in an apartment, and this grew on me. And then when COVID happened, it then forced me to come back home and said, "What? Let me just grow food," because at that moment in time, it looked like we are going to have shortages of food in the country. And I said, I have land at home. And you know, in rural areas, it's not only just a small space for you to build your homestead. We also have enough land, as you can see in my background, that I have around me, around my home, I have about 1,000 cabbages. And when I came here, I said, I am going to remove the lawn. I am not a cow, I'm not a goat, and I'm not even a big fan of spending money in removing the lawn every now and then, because at the time, I think I was spending about 1,600 rand for the person to cut the grass. And so like, no, I'm done with spending money. I just want to make money. So now I'm able to make 10,000 rand just from the grass. From the ground, which is just located around my home. Now, these are the benefits that women who are located in the rural areas have, that other who are based in the townships as well as the urban areas they don't have. Now, how then are we combating the climate change in our areas? As you can see, I'm just surrounded by the greens. Everything around me is green. Right behind me, I even have a wetland, which is then able to provide me with water, which I use to irrigate the cabbages. I'm growing mainly cabbages now, but before I had spinach, I had carrots. Like I'm using everything. I can grow anything in around my home. And if you are to look around, even the houses, we still have houses that have livestock. And I just use their manure and then use it as a fertilizer. Now, how do I then mix my engineering skills, chemical engineering skills into farming? With my passion, both also in chemical engineering, then I developed a way to produce a very fertile compost out of organic waste. When you look at organic waste, it's not only the weeds, the grass, the fallen leaves during autumn. It's not only when we're harvesting the cabbages, we have those bottoms, like those big leaves that we don't take to the markets. We are having industries. We look at big companies like ACV, which are producing organic waste like the spent grain. We are looking at Tiger brands, which are producing large quantities of organic waste. It's the things that they do not use. You go to the markets, the city markets, you go to Durban markets, Johannesburg markets, Cape Town markets. When farmers are bringing in large stock of their produce, and then if there is a gap between the farmers bringing in the food as well as the customers coming in to buy, if there is that the gap is too large, then the food starts to decay. And that's when the people that are the management at the food markets now start to take all this food and then destroy it or take it to the landfill. Now, I say to everyone that there is absolutely no need to take organic waste into the landfill. It does not belong there. What we need to do, even at household level, whatever, when you are in the kitchen, or when you are peeling that onion, when you have just eaten the banana or the orange, all those peels, do not take them to the dustbin because they don't belong there. Take them to the ground. Because when you do that, you are able then to feed your ground, and later on, you can even start growing some vegetables within your yard. You don't need to grow lawn. We are not eating lawn. And even if you decided to grow some flowers, even flowers will really appreciate having those nutrients coming from your organic waste. So this is what I am doing, and I'm doing this work together with CSR, UNDP, and now SAB has come on board as I have reached the top finalist within the SAB Sharp Hackathon. So there's quite a lot of things that are really, really happening. Also, just want to emphasize that in South Africa, we have quite a lot of women who are graduating in the engineering, mainly, like, let me just say, in the STEM careers. And these are the careers that are change makers, that are able then to have the solutions into mitigating the climate change. So now what exactly do we need? Because we have the skills. We have even the woman power. We have the land in the rural areas. I hear one of the panelists, they're saying that all the difficulties that we are facing as women in the rural areas in getting the land. Yes, it took me about 5 years to get the land in the rural areas, but I persisted and I knew that I wanted to do this. And now I have 77 hectares within the area. And I am also hiring women as well as men in the farm to come and work for us. So it's not only that as women, things are going to come at a similar platter because we are mainly women. It's war out there, and each and every one of us need to come into the economic war and really fight to enter the space. So whether you are in the rural areas or whether you are in the township or whichever area you are based in, you need to be able to ask yourself, what are you really contributing into mitigating the climate change? Because as for me and the team within my working space, we are growing vegetables, we are making fertilizer. It's not only just taking the livestock manure or we are taking the grass and using for mulching. We are also producing biochar. This is our next phase that is coming in, whereby because we understand that women are limited into entering the kraals in the rural areas. Now, instead of women entering the kraals, which is coming to as a violation, then we're saying that you can just collect the grass, you can just collect the harvest from the farmers, you can just collect the trees and any organic waste that you can find. You can even contact the companies that are willing to give the organic food waste, such as the restaurants, the hotels, that are willing to give the food waste. And then we're saying that go and be a collector, and then we come in and then process that into the fertilizer. And now then from the fertilizer, then we grow fresh food again. So what we are doing is that we are turning food waste into fresh food, and it's as directly as that. The only thing we need is just the enabling environment. Otherwise, we have the skills, we have the strength, and we have even the support from our families and communities. And the only thing we need is just the enabling environment for us to access the markets, to be able to then grow our projects from small scale into a commercial scale. Otherwise, everything is just there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Thandiwe. And certainly the crop behind you looks very strong and healthy. So we're very glad about that. I'd like to go back. I'd like to go back to the question that was raised in the Q&A, and I'd like to ask Tandile to kick us off there. In terms of the environmental legislation currently in place, and whether it is supporting farmers like Tandiwe, or whether there may be there may be more scope to discuss the nexus between environmental protection and access to farming environments. Tandile?
Thank you so much for that question. I think it's a very important one. Currently, the policies that exist within these spaces, touch on a number of South African policies in this space will touch on issues of, but there is a lot more in-depth work that needs to be done in ensuring that it's integrated throughout our policies, as you mentioned, in the agricultural space and a number of other areas, and also recognizing the interdependencies as well as interrelation of these industries. So, for example, in communities like in Mpumalanga and in some in KZN, you may find that there may be agricultural areas that are often finding themselves in conflict with adjacent mining operations, and those policies need to foresee some of these issues and make interventions to ensure that there is a process of insulating these agricultural farmers, but as well as some of the policies that exist to empower some agricultural practitioners, specifically women, are watered down because of the implicit bias that is existing in our current system. They will favor men and unwittingly will favor men. So those are some of the things that we need to ensure that in our policy are reflected and made more robust for the purpose of empowering women.
Thank you so much for that response. I'd like to ask if there are any questions from the floor that people would like to raise in person. A show of hands will help us to identify you. Peliswa, I'm not sure if I'm missing any hands from the floor or if there are any questions that have come in via other communication channels.
No. There are no
Thank you.
hands up. Let me see.
I see Tandiwe would like to give us a final comment on that last issue. So I'm going to make her just going to give her that opportunity. Please go ahead, Tandiwe.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at another question on the Q&A. When they're asking about maybe having an environment whereby women are able to share, all their headaches, if I could put it in a simple form like that. I just want to share my experiences when you start working with the land, when you start working with something that is alive, like a plant. Trust me, something beautiful happens within you. We always see people growing flowers, and then when you smell the flower, then something like it's so good, and you are able to have a very beautiful day. Now, when you are growing food, the same thing happens. You look at the bell pepper when it's still very tiny, and from the flower to up until it starts growing, and then you see it growing, and up until it's big enough, and then you take it to the market, and then you're able to make some money out of it. You look at the cabbage when it's still growing, and it's more like you're nursing a baby. Trust me, you are healing. There is no better place for you, for any woman, or even for men, in order for them to be able to find some healing, to be able to deal with all the headaches that we have in our country. Just go and start a small plot and grow vegetables or grow some flowers. And then you will see how it's going to impact your life in a very beautiful way. And once you start, and once you enjoy even the some revenue that you are going to get out of that, your life is going to change drastically after that. You may not even have a big land. You just have a small patch, but it's going to contribute very well on your income, because you're going to cut now the amount of money that you budget to buy the vegetables, because you'll be harvesting at home. I'm enjoying the great food. I'm enjoying eating organic food all year round. And it's even very good, not only for my body, but also for my mind. And even the community is benefiting, and it's very good. So I suggest that people start growing. Remove the lawn. You are not benefiting from the lawn. Actually, it's expensive for you. So decorate your household, your front yard, your backyard. Decorate it with a row of lettuce, a row of carrots, some spinach there. And when you start harvesting, and the excitement even that it will bring within the household, when children start to see the food that is growing right in front of them, it will even change the way they look at food, and even the organic waste, because whatever now that you're not going to use, then you will take it back to the ground, and it will be a very beautiful cycle that is going to contribute significantly into our climate change as a country, not only in the urban areas or townships, but also the rural people will be able now to take part into the mitigation of climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tandiwe. So I feel she's left us with a call to action as we look towards closing. The instruction to draw our children into the practice of growing our own vegetables, and also to find some quiet time in our gardens, and to go out and seek nature when we need a little bit of a boost after a long day in urban environments especially. So thank you very much, Tandiwe. I'd like to offer an opportunity for last questions. Otherwise, I will be handing over to the Chief Director of Media Engagement, Mr. William Baloy from the GCIS, to give us his closing remarks. Mr. Baloy, the floor is yours.
No, thank you very much, Johan. Let me start by thanking you for so wonderfully and eloquently running this webinar. I have no doubt in my mind that the way you ran it, you have put emphasis on why this month is also called Women's Month, as per the decision of our leaders in this country. But the good side of it, Johan, is that the panelists, I want to thank them sincerely. I mean, opened us to many, many challenging, but also creating opportunities. I mean, I was fascinated by what I think it's Tandiwe, who spoke about, the purpose of food waste to make manure, and also practically showing us with that nice background that she was. But you can't also, Joanne, ignore what Tandile said, especially when she was talking about the importance of adaptation, just a transition framework reference as building resilient communities, businesses, and individuals, especially against the impacts of climate change. And I think Sakanin also, Princess, Her Royal Highness, pushed strongly the issue of, as women, she was putting that challenge to say, how do they ensure that they are part of the plans to implement the just transition? How do they adapt their businesses to adapt to the impact of climate change? And especially also when she moved towards the women, children, and the unemployed as people that form part of the society that we need as a transition, that they should not be left behind. I think all the panelists were quite to the point, and they've said something that I think is not only limited to this webinar, but it's something that will form part of our key messages as government. As we normally on daily basis, we share key messages with the broader society. And I think they have provided us with enough messages that we can continue to unpack and share for the whole month to encourage women. But also their presentations said to me that the presentations are not only specific for Women's Month. The content that they provided, it's something that we should expand throughout the year to form and build a better society. I can't, thank them enough for what they have done to us. Safe to say, let me indicate to them that we will still, on regular basis, keep touch with them, request and invite them to share broadly some of the good ideas that they have presented, as and when we engage in other government projects. And I want to take this opportunity to also thank the team that organized this webinar, the hard work that has been put behind the scenes, but also for all those who joined us on this Friday. I want to thank you very much. I think even next time, we will also be able to tap into your valuable experience. Thank you very much, Joy.
And thank you to you, Mr. Baloy, for closing a very interesting session and a very important session in this Women's Month. We definitely like to thank our three panelists, Her Royal Highness Princess Kamboule, our Greenpeace activist Tandile Chinawahu, and our very enterprising farmer Tandiwe Mkunu. And we wish you every success with your endeavors, not only in this Women's Month, but going forward and leading the country to a sustainable future where we are all able to benefit. We thank you again for attending this afternoon, and we hereby close the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye.